do you think, Iz?
I came out as a lesbian first. To the first person I told, I was 10.
10.
I became publicly open about it when I was 15. I outed myself on national television at age 18. If
Awesome.
anyone's watched SBS Insight, there's a really old episode with me with long hair, and Jenny Rocky actually came up to me after the show and said, "I think we did well, Iz. I think we did well."
Did you say, Jenny, you want to go out for a drink? Yeah.
She's really nice.
Yeah.
But I think I can relate to Zoo's story in that people come out as multiple things at multiple times in their lives. I'm not just a lesbian, I'm also a blood player, like Zoo is. And a lot of lesbians don't get that, which is fine by me. So I find myself often playing with men who are bottoms. I think a lot of young people these days embrace the word queer because it's all encompassing.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that covers, is it all encompassing?
It doesn't just encompass traditional like gay and lesbian, it also encompasses transgender people and intersex people and people who don't necessarily want to label their sexuality. And to a degree it can also cover people who are in different types of relationships. Whether things are any different these days, in 2014, I came out in 2008. I was inspired by Barack Obama and Glee.
I love that. That's great. I'm a BDSM blood player, and I was inspired by Glee and Barack Obama. It's great, isn't it? I love all the things I hear women say something. It's freaking awesome. Yeah, and I want to ask you, because oftentimes people say that people that are younger are very involved in Grindr and telephone apps.
Brenda.
And Brenda? What's Brenda?
The lesbian version of Grindr.
Brenda. Did everybody know about Brenda? Yeah. I'm a mom. I've completely missed it. And so do you find that that's an applicable application for your lifestyle? Or is it still more grassroots? Because people sometimes say that people don't even meet people in bars anymore, but everybody I know does.
I really prefer to talk to people in the skin. It's very easy to create a fake persona online. I know, I've done it, which is why I think grassroots networking is so important.
Yeah. And do you think that in our queer community, that's still one of our great strengths?
Definitely.
Yeah. Zoo? Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the health side of same-sex relationships. Do you find that women are fairly well educated about the health sides of their sexual health? Or do you find that there's still a lot of, misinformation or people not being as educated as they need to be or would like to be?
I think there are still quite a lot of misconceptions out there about health risks within sort of same-sex relationships, in that people think that they're not really at risk of STIs, when actually they still are. And, understanding that's important, taking the appropriate sort of, making sure you don't take risks, etc., is important, because obviously you can get common things like BV or herpes or chlamydia even in same-sex relationships, and even the more uncommon things like HIV, it is possible. So all of these things are sort of through either skin-to-skin contact or mucosal contact, through oral sex or through just vaginal secretions. But you can get any of those infections, and I think people just don't really think that they're at risk. So it is important to be aware of that, but more importantly, HPV, which is one of the viruses that causes genital warts, which aren't pleasant, but can also cause silent sort of diseases like cervical cancer. And I think that's the thing, a lot of people think they don't need pap smears and that they don't really have to worry about it because they're not in a relationship with a man. But in fact, you can easily get HPV through contact with a woman, and hence you are at risk of cervical cancer in the long term. So for all women, it's really important to look after your health, to take appropriate measures when you are having new relationships. Just even through sex toys, you can get STIs. So using condoms on sex toys in new relationships until you've been tested and you're sure is actually really important. But most importantly, having pap smears every 2 years, I know it sucks, I know nobody likes to have them, but they are life-saving and really, really important. So just the message out there is that all women need to look after their health. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do in between the sheets. It's still important.
And where can people go to get that kind of information?
You can get it online. Like if you just look up lesbian women's health, you'll find all that information about what infections you can get. Like HIV, for example, you know, it's pretty uncommon, but it is on the rise, and it's not in our sort of immediate thoughts. Like in the 80s, we were all really scared of it, but now it's sort of almost, you just don't really hear about it. But it is possible to get it, even in a female relationship, through like tearing of the skin in the vagina or, you know, something like that. So just being aware that it can happen and look after yourself. Things like bacterial vaginosis are obvious because you get a fishy odour and it's pretty gross, but a lot of the other more scary things don't have any symptoms. So when you do a pap smear, it's a really good time to do a check for STIs. Just, it's easy, it can be done at the same time, and probably is worth doing every couple of years. I pretty much do a chlamydia test on everyone because it's really rife in the community. So I just do that as a routine for pap smears. But yeah, I'd do it then.
It's important. So it's important to have a really good relationship with your doctor.
Yeah.
Kath, I want to, just moving on from that, how in new relationships in blood sports and stuff, how do you negotiate physical and mental safety?
I think one of the most important things is to know your own limits and to actually do, I mean, I know it's kind of putting it back on you, but to actually know what you're comfortable with, know where you want to go, and actually, I don't know, have articulated it to yourself first and foremost before you can start discussing it with potential partners, to know, yeah, what your boundaries are, what you might want to explore, what freaks the fuck out of you and you never want to go there. So you don't end up in those situations where somebody's kind of going, do you want to do blah? And you're like, I don't know, and like freaking out. And I think, yeah, you need to practice having those conversations with people, talk about it with your friends, talk about it with your community, sort of know where you're going and what you're comfortable with before you end up in bed doing something weird and have no idea how you got there.
I think it's really important in events like this to talk about consent, and that we as a community full of queer and lesbian individuals don't talk about consent enough.
Yeah.
And the fact that you actually can't consent if you're pissed off your nit. Legally and mentally, you cannot consent if you are not sober.
How do people need to negotiate consent in public areas and in private?
Fully and openly and honestly, and with accountability, which a lot of people in this community don't have.
And what do you think we do about that? That's one thing to say people don't have it, but what do we do to make, because people all over the world are not taking responsibility for a lot of stuff. So what would be your advice for people in those situations to take responsibility?
As someone who is active in these communities and is also a survivor of sexual and physical assault, my advice would be to go with your gut instinct. If you don't feel comfortable doing something, don't do it.
Yeah.
Also learn, I think there's this great saying, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time.
And I also think there needs to be a bit of a community responsibility about stuff as well. Like when you see bad shit, call it out. I think there's this kind of, sometimes people get a bit wrapped up in the, we're all so alternative, we do all this kinky shit, we're like, whatever we are. You know, I don't know.
It's not carte blanche.
It's not carte blanche to be a dickhead. It's
Yeah.
not like carte blanche to assault people or to do whatever and then just go, oh, it doesn't matter, it was a woman, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like,
It's not.
yeah, don't excuse other people's really shitty behaviour. If you see it, I don't know, I think there's this presumption that it only happens in straight communities.
And it doesn't. I've been raped by a woman. It happens in our communities too.
And, you know, if somebody tells you your friend's done something shit, just don't pretend it didn't happen because they're your friend. I think there needs to be like a really open discussion about the sexual violence and other forms of violence that happen in our communities that just isn't happening a lot of the time because people make excuses, people minimise it, people go, it can't be that bad because, you know, it was a lesbian, whatever. Like, just don't.
It doesn't really rock.
It happens all the time.